So our next presenter is Greg Dean. One of the valuable aspects of presentations at NAVA meetings are the variety of analytical lenses and interpretive framework strategies that we have for vexillology: historical, cultural, technological, semiotic, curatorial. Greg Dean is presenting another framework, quantitative analysis. This follows on his presentation at last year's meeting on stars in flags, and today it will be the Vexillological Zoo, animals in flags. Greg.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Dean. I'm from Westminster, Colorado. I'm here to present Where Wild Things Roam, a quantitative tour through the Vexillological Zoo. So obviously animals are very famous emblems, symbols, and monikers on flags across the vexillological domain. In this study, I tried to group them into two main assertions, like, are the animals on flags native or endemic to a particular area? Are they related to a region's industries, such as animal husbandry or resources? Or are they more historical or heraldic, political? Are they tied to a national government? Or are they related to principles, concepts, and ideas? The purpose is to identify global trends on animals on flags that support or challenge those two assertions or perceptions. My goal is to broaden vexillological research in that way, and then use kind of quantitative methods to evaluate otherwise very qualitative concepts. It's not meant to necessarily be an in-depth quantitative analysis. It's not as important whether you remember it's 23% or 28%. It's more important to identify trends and general concepts in that way. Some methodology and classifications first before I dive in. So I analyzed in the neighborhood of 1,800 flags for this study. Broke them into 6 regions. They're on the map here. I'm right there. They're all color-coded by these regions. So North America's red, South America's purple, so on and so forth. That is consistent across the presentation, just to help understand when I'm talking about regional trends. I looked at 265 national flags, and I classified something as a national flag based on whether it was fully independent or sovereign, the autonomous regions, it was partially recognized states. And I used a classification hierarchy. Obviously, I prioritize national flags over state flags and civil flags, picking only one flag for each entity. And then I examined regional flags, and I looked at the regional flags of 82 countries. Those are actually the ones that are highlighted. So the ones that are highlighted were included in the study. The ones that aren't highlighted were not, and that's mostly because most regions don't have regional flags. So state flags, adopted provincial flags, or department flags. And then the ones with the little asterisks are the ones where not all of the region's flags, or all of that country's region's flags have are adopted, but I included them anyway. So it's not like for Finland, for example, not every single province or state of Finland has a flag, but most of them do. So I included that in the study as well. I will note that I did not include city flags or tribal or organizational flags. I think that's something where I could broaden this research in the future. But for the sake of simplicity, I did not include those. So again, some more rules for my study. I first had to break them into biological classifications. So I broke them into 6 main biological classifications based on phylum, subphylum, or class. That would be mammals, birds, fish, reptiles and amphibians, crustaceans and mollusks, and insects. And then for certain groups, I broke them into subclassifications, particularly for mammals and birds, because mammals and birds represent something like 85% of all the animals on flags. So I broke those two further. Mammals I broke into 22 subgroupings, like lions, bears, elephants. And then birds I broke into 34 classifications, like eagles, birds of paradise, doves, so on and so forth like that. I also tried my best to classify mythical animals, which obviously you could argue with me, and I don't have a strong stance on it, but I tried my best for the sake of classification. So for example, griffins, they're like, the body of a lion and the head and wings of an eagle. So I actually classified them both as mammals and birds. Dragons, I classified as reptiles. And the Garuda, the mythical bird in Southeast Asia, I classified as a bird, even though it's a human and a bird hybrid. So I tried my best to classify in a way that made sense. Something to note, people on flags. Obviously, we all know there are people on flags across the world. And while people are, of course, mammals, I did not include people primarily because when I'm talking about things that live in a zoo, and people could say humans live in zoos, but for the sake of this study, I did not include humans on flags. So diving into numbers, there's going to be lots of charts and bar charts and colors, and I apologize if that's a lot for you. So just again, focus on the trends. I looked at 1,831 flags, 265 national flags, 1,566 regional flags, of which 560 flags contained at least one animal. That's 677 classifications of animal, because oftentimes flags have more than one type of animal or type of mammal. And then of that, I went deeper, and there's 1,048 individual animals on the 560 flags that I identified in my study. So looking at the two donut charts here, the upper one is for national flags. So on national flags, birds dominate national flags. 50% of national flags that contain animals are birds, whereas only about a third contain mammals. But that trend is actually the opposite on regional flags. Mammals dominate. Over half of animals on flags of regions are mammals, and only a third are birds. And then you also start seeing a lot more diversity. So you see 1% insects, 2% crustaceans and mollusks. See a higher volume of fish on regional flags. And then, spoiler alert, I know everyone's thinking in their head, they're trying to figure out what animals are common on flags. And everyone's probably either thinking lions or eagles. That's correct. About a quarter of all animals on national flags are lions, and about a quarter are eagles. But 50% of animals on national flags are neither of those things. So again, that's the whole point of the study. So, we know eagles are common, but just how common are they? I can actually answer that question. So here's a stacked bar chart. I broke it down regionally because, again, I'm trying to identify regional patterns. And one more thing in this past one, I will note that, so regionally, it's pretty consistent. About 30% of all flags across the world, depending on region, have animals on them. So 1 in 3 has an animal on them. Obviously, Oceania and Europe are more common. They're more likely to have them, but only slightly more. And North America and South America are less likely to have animals, but more or less about 30%. So that's something to keep in your mind. About 1 in 3 flags around the world has an animal on them. So looking at the regionality of it, again, it generally follows the national trends, the global trends. About 30% of flags have animals. And then when you break those proportions up by region, you kind of see where it falls into play, where, around 50% are mammals, around 30% are birds. There are a couple of outliers. First, with Asia, they have the highest proportion of fish on any flag in the world. So Asian flags are more likely to have fish on them, which again, intuitively makes a little bit of sense. Specifically on the upper left here, the fish of Asia, the Bangus milkfish is very common. It actually shows up on 18 of the 23 provincial flags of the flag of the Philippines. It's important because it's a major fishery product of the Philippines, but also it's tied to that second assertion that's also a national symbol. It's the unofficial national fish of the Philippines. And so it actually appears in some form or fashion, either stylized or graphic on, like I said, 17 or 18 of the provincial flags of the Philippines. They also have the highest proportion of, or they also have a more evenly distributed set of mammals and birds, which is unique to Asia. Whereas like North America, you're more likely to see a mammal than you are to see a bird on a regional flag in North America. Another exception to this rule is obviously Oceania. So you can see here it has the lowest proportion of mammals. Only 12% of oceanic flags have any mammals on them. That's not to say that mammals don't live in Oceania. That kind of goes against that assertion I made that, animals are likely to appear on a flag if they're endemic or native there. There are, of course, mammals in Oceania. There are a lot of aquatic mammals, but they don't appear on flags, which is interesting. The flags of Oceania are more likely to have crustaceans. They have the highest proportion of crustaceans. 9% of oceanic flags have crustaceans or mollusks on them, which again makes sense given they're Pacific islands. But birds dominate the flags of Oceania. 63% of all flags of Oceania that I studied had at least one bird on them. birds in the culture of in Oceania connect the spiritual and natural world, so that's not uncommon or unexpected. Their food sources, they're associated with their ancestors. They're common in folklore and art. And they're intrinsic to social hierarchy in a lot of oceanic tribes. So again, it's very understood that they will appear on those flags. It's also unique that they're not the same bird. There are 13 different varieties of birds on 27 flags in Oceania from 7 countries. So everyone immediately goes to the bird of paradise, but that bird only occurs on the flags of Papua New Guinea. But you can see the other examples I show here, very different birds on Palau, the Solomon Islands, Australia, and Kiribati. So diving into mammals. So for your information, I have a lot of puns. I apologize in advance, or you're welcome in advance. So mammals, again, are the most common. About 50% of all animals on flags are mammals. There are 396 classifications on 337 flags that I identified, representing 540 individual animals on flags that are mammals. Shocker lions are the most common. They occur on around a quarter of the flags, or 102 flags that I studied have at least one lion on them. But then maybe surprising is bovines are actually the second most common. They occur on 100 flags, and bovines are cloven hooved animals, cattle, cow, sheep, goats, bulls. And then, of course, you have horses and elk and deer. Those are also very common. And then mammals have 22 subclassifications. I won't read through all of those on the slide there, but you can see they don't occur as commonly, but they can include like camels, other cats that aren't lions. So like on the flag of Malaysia here, you have tigers, things like that. But it's interesting that, lions are not as common as we might think, especially when it relates to like cows. Diving in, we can't talk about lions without talking about heraldry. And again, I'm not a heraldic expert by any stretch of the imagination, but again, I tried to dive a little bit deeper into that. So lions are obviously the most common animal. They occur on, there's 171 individual lions that occur on 102 flags. 28% of all national flags have lions on them, and 17% of all regional flags do. Lions symbols date back to at least the 11th century with the development of heraldry, and specifically the English lion. They were originally supporters of shields on flags or coats of arms. They expanded in the 13th and 14th century and include lots of other countries like modern-day Spain, Austria, and Germany. I look at the attitude of a lion. So obviously there are a myriad of lion attitudes. Heraldry is very specific on the position of claws and arms and legs. I try to simplify that. I broke them into 3 main attitudes. That's a lion rampant or rearing up, a lion passant or walking, and then a lion couchant, which is like striding or sitting, sitting or laying down. Rampant lions, those are the rearing up lions, occur on 60% of flags. So that's about 60 of the 102 are the lions rearing up. And if you look at the small pie charts here, rampant lions dominate on flags of Europe. So 3/4 of those rampant lions are on European flags. Looking at passant flags, they occur much less commonly. Around 1/4 of lions on flags are actually in the striding motion, or the Lion of England. But interestingly, 7 out of 10 are not on flags of Europe. They occur outside of Europe. Obviously, no shocker, they occur mostly on Commonwealth flags, because Lion of England, specifically the Cayman Islands, Fiji, the regional flags of New South Wales and Tasmania, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Islands, Saskatchewan, Canada, have those kinds of flags as well. And then you have Eastern flags, so like on Eastern or Asian cultures. Those are typically in the walking stance, but they're not at all related to European heraldry. Those, like the flag of Sri Lanka, that is based on Buddhist mythology. You have lines on flags in that attitude on the flags of Tibet, across Thailand, Myanmar, and the Philippines. Again, not related to European lions. Before I move on to bovines, a little bit more on lions. They dominate again in European flags. 30% of flags containing animals in Europe are lions on them. But almost no lions on the flags of Africa. which is kind of interesting given that they exist in Africa. I would argue maybe that that's often related to the history of colonialism, and as those countries became independent, they wanted to shun those European symbols and adopt their own symbols instead. But now we have number. Only 4% of African flags have lions on them, which I thought was quite interesting. They're also not as common on North America, South America, or Oceania. Again, the lions that do occur in North America are, again, related to the Commonwealth, specifically in Canada and the Caribbean. But they don't occur anywhere else. And in fact, 85% of flags that have lions don't have any, or flags with animals don't have any lions on them. There are no U.S. states with lions on them. Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, also colonized by Britain, don't have any lions on them. And then in South America, the flags of Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Uruguay, Venezuela, all colonized by Spain, don't have any lions on them either. Again, potentially shunning that past colonialism. So before I move on again, so bovines are very common. They're the second most likely mammal to occur on a flag. But of those, over two or near 2/3 are cattle, cows, bulls, things like that. That's cloven hooved animals. They only usually occur on regional flags. 96% of all bovines that occur on flags occur on regional flags. There are only 4 national flags that I found that actually have bovines on them. That would be Andorra, Croatia, the Falkland Islands, and Moldova. So they're very common, but only on regional flags. I thought that was quite interesting. So flipping the bird. Again, I won't dive too much into birds because James Croft did such a great presentation at NAVA 57 on the aviary, but I thought I'd add some statistics to it. Obviously, birds represent 30 to 40% of animals on flags. Most of those are eagles. There are 92 flags containing eagles, or 112 eagles on flags that I studied. Some other common ones would be mythical birds, doves, condors, swans, things like that. And here are some examples of some flags. So the flamingos in Kenya, you have a friarbird in Papua New Guinea, the stork in Hungary. So they're very common, and birds are far more unique in that there are 34 subclassifications because they're so unique, and they're usually only isolated to 1 or 2 flags. So where you might see a lot of lions, you don't see a ton of storks on flags. You might see 1 or 2, for example. For sake of time, I'll skip through this one. This is eagles on flags. Here you can kind of see where they most likely occur. Again, eagles as symbols predate heraldry, so they're very, very old. They showed up on Roman vexilloids, 1000 BC. Then you have the double-headed eagle that appeared in the 10th century as part of the Byzantine and Roman Empire. Again, you see a lot of regionality to them. Eagles are very common in North America, but where they differ is that North American eagles are a lot less stylized. They're more detailed, more biological. They tend to show more detail. That harkens back to the hideous seal on a bed sheet. Again, that most of the state flags that have eagles are really detailed and not really that easy to redraw, for example. Diving into mythical birds, again, they occur mostly in flags of Asia and Europe, mostly Garuda on the flags of Thailand. And then you have the griffin. Again, I know it's a mammal and a bird, so I classified it as both. The griffin occurs on Norway and Poland, for example. Then you have some other lesser common mythical birds in Oceania and North America, specifically the phoenix. I won't go over this. I'm almost out of time. So these are just some more fun with flags you can look at. So you can see, like, for example, reptiles. Most reptiles occur on flags of Europe. Again, that's dragons mostly. But you also see some fun ones. You know, the Komodo dragon on a flag of Indonesia. You see a turtle on a regional flag of Guyana. And then you have the alligators or crocodiles. I can never remember which ones are which. On the flag of Papua New Guinea, for example. And then Andy did a great paper a long time ago on bears. And so I used that one as a reference. Bears usually only occur in Europe. 90% of all bears on flags occur in Europe, and only a little bit in North America, specifically California, the famous one. And then there's also bears on the flag of the state of Missouri. Surface area, I did a polygon masking algorithm to help quantify the surface area of animals on flags. And this is for national flags. So the largest national flag by surface area is the flag of Wales with the dragon. You have the U.S. Virgin Islands, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and Albania are all up there. Then the low ones are the flag of Malta, which if you look and squint really hard, you can see it's a man riding, St. George riding a horse, killing a dragon. On the seal of the flag, it's only 0.14% of the surface area of a flag. I also ran it on states. The biggest animals on flags on U.S. states are Louisiana, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. That has the horses and the eagles, and then those pelicans. Looking at regional flags, I found something quite different. The average on a national flag is only 4.6%, but if you look at the regional flags, they're much higher. So they're more likely to have them, and then they're also larger. And then the flags of Europe are the animals on flags of Europe are 2 times larger than any other region. So they're equally likely to occur, but when they do occur on flags of Europe, they're twice as large as everyone else's. So you can see some regional flags of Europe on the far left there. I'm out of time. So just wrapping it up here. Again, the purpose of the study was to identify and evaluate these patterns in a more quantitative way. I wanted to find regionality to flags and see if I could find any trends on regional flags, both regional flags versus national flags, or regional flags based on like Oceania, Africa, so on and so forth. So this one is all animals combined. So flags are, lions, bovine, eagles. They're common, but they're not as common as you might think. They don't dominate. There's not every flag is a lion. And then of the 1,048 animals that I found, you can kind of see it's even more divided. There's a lot of variability of animals on flags. So thank you.
We actually have a question from our chat. Did you see any prehistoric creatures and how did you classify them?
Well, okay, so prehistoric, I guess. There was one flag that had a dinosaur on it. I classified a dinosaur as a reptile. I think it was on a flag of Mongolia, has a dinosaur on it. Other than that, I can't recall off the top. I mean, I looked at 1,800 flags, so I'm sure I did. And I have a massive spreadsheet and a access database that I try to keep track of all these animals. So I'm sure I did. The one that's reaching out to me is dragons, or sorry, that one dinosaur flag. I thought I'd actually see more dinosaur flags, but I didn't. You could argue that like dragons are prehistoric because they're not. I mean, they're not real. They're mythical. Anyway, so it's a yes and no, I guess, is the answer to that question.
Hello. I'm curious it sounds like you have a spreadsheet or a database, but what was the tool you found most helpful for researching all these, like getting a complete set of subnational flags in countries? Because when I worked on my own flag project, I had a really hard time feeling like I had that closed set and feeling like I wasn't missing anything at the same time without wasting tons of hours, on different sources. Like, did you use CRW's Flag of the World's website or yeah?
I did waste a lot of my time. But yeah, I started at CRW flags, the database. I would cross-reference with Wikipedia. Oftentimes they were not the same. So sometimes they would show one region that didn't have an animal and I'd find one that did. For the sake of this study, if I found a flag that showed it had an animal, I included it just for completeness. That was my primary source. And then to figure out what the animal was, because the image quality was also an issue, where a lot of the regional flags specifically are really blurry and grainy. And I'm like, it kind of looks like a bird, but I can't tell if it's an eagle or a friar bird or a seagull. So I actually had some subclassifications that are just like stylized or unidentifiable, but I could tell it was a bird. I would classify it as a bird, but I wouldn't subclassify it any further.
There is a town in the Czech Republic, I think it is, that has put trilobites on its coat of arms and flag, and I saw it as an FOTW, and I think they would be classified as crustaceans. And evidently they found some fossils of trilobites in that area. Also, I would like to know if you've looked into any things that are not alive, but they were made by animals, like the beehive is a traditional symbol of Utah, and it's on their old and new state flags, and a flag with a hornet's nest was supposed to have been used in North Carolina at the beginning of the Revolution in 1775.
That's a good question. So habitats no, but if there were animals related to, or if it was a footprint, I would include that as an animal, because it was sometimes hard to tell whether that was an actual foot or a footprint. So I did use pieces of animals as well. So if it was just the head of a lion, I classified that as a lion. If it was a wing, I would classify that as a bird. So I did, as an attempt to make this data set more comprehensive, I did include pieces of animals or portions of animals. There's a flag in Gabon that has bees on it, but some of the bees are truncated or cut off. I did count those as bees in insects, for example, but I did not classify like a bee's nest as an animal.
Not counting prehistoric animals and not counting the flag of California, because I already know that the bear on California's flag is extinct. What flags did you come across that had extinct animals? Not counting prehistoric.
I'm sure I have that answer. I don't know it off the top of my head. It's in my. I'll send you the spreadsheet. You can dig through. It's pretty comprehensive. It's like a million rows because every regional flag has its own row, and then there's like 87 columns. Because I also collected information on, and I want to do some future work on humans on flags, writing on flags, flags on flags. As I was reviewing it, I didn't just look at it for animals. I tried to classify. I tried to collect as much information so I didn't have to re-waste all of my time. I swear I have friends. But I live in Colorado and I don't ski, so there's not a lot to do in the winter. So oh, we're out of time. Okay. Thank you.